did seem like that top 4. And we've talked about the top 5,
right?
That it looked like they're going to be roster locks. But it did seem like it was Diggs, Douglas, and Booty a lot, and then Mac Hollins worked in there. Do you like that top 4 right now? And then even a little bit beyond them, if we're talking about 6, 7, what are they going to keep? Who's on the roster? How did you kind of view that wide receiver room today?
Right. Obviously, you'd like to see a little bit more from Kyle Williams and have him start to push some of those X receivers, whether it's Booty or Mac Hollins, for reps. Especially, you see the speed with Kyle Williams, and I think they have to round out his game a little bit, but he clearly has a different dimension of speed than some of those other guys in the room. So I'm hoping that maybe it's a little bit more of a slow burn with Kyle Williams, and usually around Halloween, Thanksgiving time, those types of rookies start to emerge and really get playing time in games. I'm with you that those 4 guys seem to catch the majority of the passes or get the majority of the reps with Drake May. When it comes to 6 and 7, the way I look at it with Efton Chism is that you look at some of these slot receivers they've had in the past. Julian Edelman is probably the biggest one of this example, but even Wes Welker and Troy Brown, even going back to the 90s, it took them like a year or two to really solidify themselves as NFL players. It did not happen for those guys right away. And I just wonder with Efton Chism, do you give him that opportunity to develop into a player that 2 years down the line, we're talking about the starting slot receiver, the top slot receiver in a Josh McDaniels offense. So for those reasons, I probably am starting to gravitate towards hanging on to Efton Chism to see if he can do that. Because let's face it, like Edelman, his first camp, I talked to Paul Perillo tells me all the time about some of those camps back in the day. He said Edelman couldn't catch a pass. He was dropping everything, like he couldn't catch a pass. And then they get into the preseason, and he has the big punt return against Philly, and it was all she wrote. Like he was just on the team from that step forward. So I'm looking for Efton Chism to maybe make this roster. And I have to be honest, like Javon Baker's doing everything that he can to make the team. I don't know if it's going to be enough. It's a little bit of a crowded room, but he competes his butt off in special teams. He's getting into it with guys and things like that, getting fired up. He has done everything that he could to make a roster push. So I would right now say that those 2 guys are on my 53.
And one other guy I want to touch on is Pop Douglas, who also had a good day. Now, the first rep of one-on-ones, I know he slipped, but then he slipped again. It turned out it was because he was being held, and then pretty much seemed automatic himself on the day, where Byron Murphy, Pop Douglas is one of the matchups I kind of highlighted coming into this, with Byron Murphy being one of the better slot corners in the league, but also a guy who's bigger, more physical, doesn't really excel in those short areas which Mario Douglas does. And while, again, you saw some of the physicality worked in Murphy's favor at sometimes, very much didn't on the majority of reps. I thought DeMario Douglas looked like, along with Stephon Diggs, a guy who can be relied on as that short to intermediate threat with Drake May. You hope that Kyle Williams at some point can bring some verticality. Kayshawn Booty being that sacrificial X. One thing I think is odd is that we've seen none of the go balls that we kind of saw last year, where Booty was the only person who could consistently win downfield for Drake May. Wish we saw more of that, but you also saw some of the rhythm they've kind of built. There was one throw, I think you mentioned towards the end of practice, where I think Drake may have been pressured, tried to throw some anticipation, and it almost turned into an interception. But I thought Booty was pretty reliable today as well. But Efton Chism, man, I've tried not to get too carried away, because we've had this architect, right? We had the Braxton Berrios.
Get carried away. He's asking.
Come on,
dude.
I mean,
we've had different versions of this where you don't call, and I'm not comparing him to Julian Edelman or Danny Amendola. But for a rookie, honestly, where he is in this offense is impressive. Todd Downing said that he picked it up pretty quickly. He looks like he's consistently running the right routes. Like Kyle Williams at one point, there was a deep ball from Drake May where he had to kind of track it over both shoulders because he didn't know where it was going. Made me think it might have been a deep option route where he didn't go the right way. You don't see that with Efton Chism. He got some work with Drake May. He caught pretty much everything thrown his way. Doesn't have, I think, the shake of like a Julian Edelman, but I think he's more physical, and he's a strong guy. You see that contact balance when guys try to throw him off routes after the catch as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Efton Chism is someone who starts kind of getting into that wide receiver 4 mix, because Mac Hollins has been kind of inconsistent. He's had his moments, but he's also had his errors, and I think Chism is someone who continues to show that he deserves the opportunities he gets, on top of being someone who can contribute as a punt returner if need be. I know he had that one return against the Commanders where he kind of gets the return or the coverage unit going one way, creates an angle for himself. So I'm excited about Efton Chism. I want to see him keep getting more opportunities with Drake May. I'm excited.
I'm just saying, like, Julian Edelman's going into the Patriots Hall of Fame in a month, and like you're telling me that he's an ex-Edelman. So that's
no.
Red jacket fitting for Efton Chism here in Minnesota.
Isn't that what I just heard?
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think in all seriousness, I think there's the natural overlap, right? Because they're going to have the same role. Chism is big enough that he can be more of a Z slot versus a Pop Douglas, where he's more of an Amendola, plays only in the slot. And they are different players. Like I said, I think Chism's more physical, whereas Jules was just crazy quick. I don't think Chism is quite there. But in terms of being that reliable guy early on, I mean, he's off to a very good start.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Chism, just going back to Edelman and that comp for a second, and even Welker, who I think was underrated in this regard, both those guys could run block really well from the slot.
Absolutely.
And Edelman was feisty as hell. Like, he would stick his nose in there, and he would really run block. And if you're going to be in 11 personnel as the slot receiver, you're going to be, facing nickels, but you're also going to maybe need to, crack on an end or a linebacker every once in a while. And you have to be able to hold your own in those types of battles. So does Efton Chism have the play strength? Does he have the ability to translate there? Because that could be something that he has over Pop Douglas. He's a little bit bigger. I do think he has a little bit more play strength. So I'm not asking to take any reps away from Pop. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just looking at it from a long-term perspective. You have to be able to block in that role. And I know people hate to hear that because they hate about when we obsess over blocking with wide receivers, but in order to get on the field, that's just the way it is. If you want to play him, then he's got to be able to block.
And you love hearing about Edelman blocking when he's starting fights and he's kind of just taking it right to the edge of the whistle, which I don't think Chism's that kind of dog necessarily. We haven't seen that from him. But one thing I did notice against Commanders when he was run blocking, always looking for assignments. So, the effort's there. Let's see if he can execute that.
And even against the Commanders, he has that, short catch. I think it was on the right sideline, 3 yards. Instead of just going out of bounds, lowers his shoulder. Right? He's got that little psychoness to him. So, Evan, I know we've had property on Chism Island for a long time. It's getting pretty crowded around here. Taylor's moving in.
I'm moving in.
What? Taylor's been moved in.
Okay, I was hyped when he got signed.
Everybody can join the Chism
Island. It's open.
Brian and I have penthouses.
Yes.
We have estates on Chism Island. But if you want to move into the pool house, Taylor, right now,
pool house,
if
please.
You want to go,
I've got an observatory. I'm looking out for any potential threats.
But it does feel, when you're watching that second offense, just anytime they need a play, it goes to Efton Chism. And today, even he worked in a little bit with Drake. Still, he got open on one trick play downfield that they weren't able to connect on. But Efton Chism just very consistent.